All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning. Sorry, everyone, that I was late. I had some computer issues. In fact, my computer is still acting kind of funny, so if something happens in the middle of the class, I apologize ahead of time. We'll just give 1 more minute for everyone to get on. Okay, so how's everyone today? So already into week 13, just 2 more classes today and next week. All right, so today's class, we're going to be looking at globalization in the context of community development. So yeah, good morning to everyone. Sorry, I'm getting started because we're late, so I apologize for not having a lot of small talk at the beginning of class like usual. So we're just going to jump right in because it's already 20 minutes late starting. So let's just put up the Pucha Blast for today. Let's see here. Okay. And so there we are. All right, so today's class, we're going to actually just want to start off with an activity rather. I'd like to get your opinion actually on what you guys think about globalization. So we're going to do that first before we do the lecture. And today's lecture is actually not that long, but it's I actually like this topic a lot because globalization is something that we live with every day. It's intrusive. It's in our lives every day, both the good and the bad of it. So it's important that we really understand it and how it impacts communities and nations. And that's really what we're going to, inshallah, talk about today. But I first want to get your opinions about it before we get into any of the material, the actual material. I'd first like to hear what you guys think about globalization. As you guys know, I'm always interested in your opinions about stuff. I'm always asking you for your opinions, and I do. I really like to understand what young people think about these issues. Okay, so then we'll have the lecture. Like I said, it's not too long. It's not very long, like in the previous weeks. And then I'm going to leave you with an activity. You can do it. You're going to do it on your own. It's not going to be part of the class, but I'll leave you some class time to do it. So there's a report here, as you can see. It looks like it's quite long, but it's actually not that long because there's a lot of diagrams and charts and stuff. So in terms of text, it's not that long. Okay, but I want you to read the report, and you can read it. You know, you can discuss it with your friends, no problem. But I just want you to read the report. It's a report about globalization and economic development from the perspective of Malaysia. So it really goes into detail about, especially the economics of globalization and how it's impacted the country. And so I'd like you to read the article, and then based on what we discussed today in class, the lecture and so forth, and the article, the report, I want you to give me your feedback. So if you can see there on the Pucha Blast, it says, after reading the report, I want you to write, I think globalization is good or bad or mixed. Okay, so you choose one based on your opinion, based on what you have gathered from today's class. You think it's good, bad, or mixed for Malaysia, and you're going to give 3 reasons why. Okay, they don't have to be terribly long. They can be short, but I want them to be substantive. So don't just say because it's good for the economy. Try to be a bit more specific. Okay, provide some detail to your answers with evidence provided from the article or from the lecture. Okay, and then you're going to post that on the Padlet. You can just click on the link, take you to the Padlet, and you can just write it there on the Padlet. Okay, and so please try to do that before next week's class. Okay, so I'd like to see your answers before next week's class. So this is going to be the last in-class assignment or exercise that you guys will do. All right. So that's today's class. Any questions before we start? Excuse me. Questions, comments, concerns, anything about assignments or exams or anything anybody wants to raise? Questions? No, you guys are very quiet today. Are you all there? Can I hear somebody's voice? Nobody wants to speak, I guess. Oh, I faintly heard a voice. Was that Hilmi? Who was that? Who is it? Oh, Hazif. The sound is not very good. Okay, I don't know who that was. Oh, Sham. Oh, it was Nizel. Oh, okay, okay. Well, good morning. Yeah, okay. About the assignment, the grades the marks I just passed out last week. Again, I apologize for the late return on the assignments. They were, for the most part, very good. Some of you may be a little bit disappointed in your score. And let me just tell you my thinking in terms of assignments and exams this semester. So because this semester is very unique, it's a fully online, well, now it's fully online for the rest of the semester. It's fully online for more than half the semester. And we have basically 2 assignments and 2 exams for the semester. My thinking is that because the exams are going to be a bit on the easy side, because they're online, open book, open internet, and all that. As you can see, the scores for the first exam were quite high. You guys did very well. And of course, it's an open format. It's an open online, open internet, open book format. So it's going to tend to be a bit easier in that sense. And you can tell by the marks. The marks were quite high for the first exam. So I need to sort of balance that out with the assignments. So I'm going to be a little bit more rigorous, a bit harder on you in terms of grading your assignments than I am on the exams, because the exams are, again, you have some advantages there with the exams. And so the grades in the exams are probably going to be a bit higher than the assignments. So I'm going to be a bit more tough on you for the assignments than I will for the exams. Okay, just so you're aware. I have to sort of balance it out somehow. It can't be all. It can't be too easy for you guys. There has to be some challenge. And so for the final exam, just so you know, it's going to be an all open-ended exam, open-ended questions. It's going to be all subjective questions. I think there's 6 questions, 5 or 6 questions, short answer. Okay, so you will provide the answer. There's no multiple choice, no true, false, nothing. Okay, again, it's not only final exam, but it's also an open everything exam. And I just find it very hard to do multiple choice questions in an online format, only because I don't know, I think it's for bachelor students, final year students, I think you guys can do better. And I've seen your work. I've seen your work in terms of your first exam, your assignment, and you guys are good. You have the ability to write, and you have the ability to think well. So I think the final exam will be the format won't bother you guys. I think you'll do fine. Inshallah, you'll do fine. Okay, but just so you know, it is an open answer format. All right, so it's short answer. There's no objective questions. All right. Any questions about that? So next week, the final class, I will just go over what's in terms of content, what you need to look for, what you need to prepare for the final exam. Okay, but it's basically just the topics that we've covered since the midterm. So there's nothing before. Anything that was on the midterm will not be on the final. All right. But I'll go into more detail next week, inshallah. Okay, is that all right with everyone? If not, please let me know now. Tell me, ask me.
Understand, Dr.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Zuleika. Thanks, Sham. Asif. All right. Okay, I'm so bummed that we couldn't finish our. I'm so bummed we couldn't finish our semester face to face. I was really enjoying our classes before the MCO when we were interacting live and in person. But anyway, we'll continue. Okay. Oh, by the way, Zuleika, I owe you your 3-chapter feedback. Inshallah, very soon I'll be getting it back to you. Okay. So let's start the activity. So let's go to the Padlet here. Now I want you guys to answer this question. Go ahead, think about it for a few minutes, and then just write your answers in here. Totally up to you how much you want to write, but I want to know what you guys think of globalization. What has been the effect of globalization on Malaysian development, community development? And you can, I mean, it doesn't have to be community per se. You can just talk about in general in Malaysia. How has globalization affected Malaysia? I mean, if you can, think about it on a personal level, right? The different ways. Now, I'm not going to define globalization for you yet. I'm going to wait until the lecture to do that. But I'm sure you have an idea because everybody's heard this term, globalization. I'm gonna let you guys define it on your own first. All right. So go on to the Padlet. Write your answers here on the Padlet. So wait, maybe it's hard for you guys to do that. How can I? Oops. Let's. Okay, so if you just want to, I'll make it easy. There's the link. So go ahead and think about it for a minute, and then write your answers up here on the board. I like using Padlet because I can see everyone's answers, and you can get a sense of what everyone's thinking. It's nice. It's a nice format. A bit better than a chat room. Yeah. So no need to go looking it up on the internet or anything. Just in your own opinion, your own ideas. Okay, someone said exports. Exports of Malaysia to other places, I'm assuming. Okay, make full use of resources such as rubber, getah, palm oil. Okay, so it's about exporting resources and products. Yeah. All right. And so what's been the effect of that on Malaysia? So someone said it's increased the quality of life. Okay, interesting. All right. There's no right or wrong answer here, guys. Just looking at how you see it, because globalization is very controversial. People have very different views of it. Some say it's very good. Some say it's very detrimental to communities. All right. All right. Economic growth towards a high income nation. Okay. Interesting. Increased quality of life. Other countries can sponsor community development projects for Malaysia. All right. So what does that mean? Other countries sponsor community development for Malaysia. So like Russia comes and says, we're going to sponsor a community in Malaysia. How does that work? Maybe you can explain that a bit more. Process of interaction. Okay. So right now, you guys are interacting with your Matsale lecturer. Is that an indicator of globalization? Political environment. Okay, what does that mean? Political environment. How has it affected the political environment? Try to elaborate a little bit. Improvement of transportation. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Okay, it's improved transportation. You get your trains from China and Canada, and you have your engineers from Germany come and build the like the LRT and MRT, whatever. You get the engineers from other countries coming, so that's true. Okay, improving inequality. Interesting, improving inequality. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Online payments. Okay, that's right. That's true. Yeah, we do online payments from here in Malaysia. We make a payment and it actually is being processed by someone in India or something. Yeah. Increased competition, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Employment rises. Okay, employment increases. Improve. I see improve, not improvements. In terms of what improvements? Food delivery. So Food Panda is not from Malaysia, it's from another country? Food delivery. Is Food Panda a local company or is it international? Food from around the world, okay, yeah. So you get your McDonald's, right? Your KFC, that's from other countries. Increased cultural understanding, interesting. Interesting. Improved technology, increased FDI. That's for sure. Yeah, that's definitely true. Improved technology. Bus. What's bus? Oh, business online. Online business. All right. Infrastructure. Increased communication through virtual tools like the internet, globalization has helped to improve human communications. Okay. All right. Food Panda is local. Somebody said Food Panda is local. Economic growth, high income nation. Exports of Malaysia increases and improves consumer welfare. Okay. All right. So from what I can see, and they're still coming in, that's good. But from what I can see, the vast majority of you guys think that globalization is a positive thing for Malaysia. You think it's a good thing, all right? So that's just what I've gathered from your comments. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's a position. It's a position that you are taking. It's your opinion, and that's fine. Okay. Human rights concern across the globe. Yeah. Well, it does. Yes, it does raise human rights concerns, and hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. Exports, increased trade, greater choice of goods. Yep, that's definitely true. Okay. All right, so I can basically see the trends here that you guys are referring to. All right, so it's mostly, you guys, I can see mostly think of it as a positive thing. So let's, now let's share and look at the, oh, I have some more coming in. I'll wait. Go ahead, please. For those of you who have not added to the discussion, please go ahead and add your comments. Immigrant doctor, what does that mean? Who'd like to, can you elaborate on this one here? Yeah. Foreign workers. Yeah, like me, I'm a foreign worker. Although I'm a permanent resident, I'm not actually I was not brought into the country to work per se. I'm migrated here for family reasons and so forth. So I'm not necessarily considered a foreign worker, but I am a foreigner who's working here. But now I'm a permanent resident. So increased incidence of corruption with a question mark. I like that. I like that. You're asking, does it increase corruption? And that's a great question. Does it increase corruption? I don't know if anybody has a good answer for that, actually. it'd be a very difficult thing to prove, I would imagine. But it's a great question. Foreign worker, we will know their culture, apply it in Malaysia, like international restaurant and other things. Okay. So you're seeing that as a positive thing. That's great. A lot of people don't, right? A lot of people, they demonize foreign workers. So that's interesting. Yeah, very good. Increased lifestyle diseases. All right, interesting. Like COVID-19. Although COVID-19 is not a lifestyle disease, it's an acute infectious disease. It's not a lifestyle disease per se, but okay, I see elaboration here. Globalization has brought in the consumption of processed foods. All right. Oh, I lost it there. Processed foods, planting crops using chemicals. Interesting. So before globalization, Malaysia did not produce processed foods. Is that your argument? It may be true. I don't know if Malaysia, I'm sure they produced some processed foods before globalization, but yeah, they probably imported a lot of these techniques and systems for food production from the West primarily, right? I mean, I could talk a lot about food production because it's something of a bit of personal interest to me, especially processed food production. We'll touch on that a little bit later. The risk of failure for small companies that cannot compete globally. Yeah, that's a big one. Loss of domestic industries. That's another controversial issue. Webinar? Webinar. Webinars meaning they're an aspect of globalization. Threaten local cultures, racial integration. All right, these are all questions that are asked about globalization. National security. What else? Economic cooperation strengthened, overseas commodity market expanded. I'm assuming you got that from the internet. Yeah, well, this is the debatable thing about economic cooperation. It's quite debatable, but there are a lot of indicators that there's more economic cooperation. Increased risk of exploitation. Okay, interesting. You have human trafficking. You have low-cost foreign labor. So foreign workers are brought in, but they're paid very little, right? So there's the incidence of exploitation of workers. Unemployment. Again, that's something that's debated a lot, whether globalization adds to unemployment or it creates employment. The risk of failure for smaller companies that cannot compete globally. Yeah, that's a great point. A loss of domestic industries. Okay, so now I can see now you're hitting on some of the more negative claims about globalization, accusations about globalization being harmful for countries. Innovation. Okay, so there's arguably more innovation as a result of globalization. Okay, well, it looks like you're pretty much done. Thank you. That was very interesting. I can see you guys have a good grasp of it, at least in terms of a lot of the main hot button issues related to globalization. So that's good. So let me now share. I'm going to go to my slides. These have been uploaded to Puja Blast. Okay, so okay. So community development in the context of globalization. So this is a really important issue, and it's, as you guys have already pointed out, it's a very controversial issue, very controversial, because globalization is with us. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And there are those that have very strong feelings about it one way or the other. So when we see, for example, that rates of diabetes in Malaysia are skyrocketing, what's the first thing many people refer to? What's the first source of blame often given to? Who can tell me? Who can tell me when the issue of, for example, health, things like rates of diabetes increasing, rates of heart disease, all these lifestyle diseases, as someone mentioned just now, when that gets talked about, usually the first, what gets blamed first usually? What often gets blamed? Who can tell me? It's because of what? In relation to globalization? Food. Exactly. Yeah, food and food production. Those processed foods that you guys just mentioned, unhealthy lifestyle, right? And so a lot, yeah, it is unhealthy lifestyle. And unhealthy lifestyle includes what? What we eat, how active we are, how we spend our time, what kind of activities we spend our time doing. So if we start with the kind of foods we eat, usually a lot of people will point to the first thing, which is fast food, right? And where does fast food come from? It comes from the West. It comes from my country, most of it. McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, all that. So people say, oh, it's because of fast food. It's because of all this Western food, right? All this processed food, right? And there's a lot of evidence that that's true. There's a lot of evidence that that's true. Highly processed foods with lots of high in sugar and so forth are a major cause of diabetes. The main cause of diabetes, sugar. Okay, and those processed foods. So fast food and technology, which also really comes from, more or less comes from the West. Makes us lazy. Yes, Tracy Ann, thank you. What's daboba, Zuleika? Can you please explain what that means? Oh, yeah, milk tea, yeah. So is bubble tea Malaysian or is it from somewhere else? Oh, it's from China. Okay. So again, if let's assume it is from China. Maybe we don't know for sure, but maybe let's just assume it is. Again, it's another another imported product. At least the concept is imported. Oh, Taiwan. Okay. So Tea Live is a Taiwanese company? Tea Live, or is it a Malaysian company? Oh, it's a Malaysian company. But again, the concept, right? The concept, where does it come from? So maybe that's imported. Yeah, I don't think, 100 years ago, too many people in the kampong were drinking bubble tea. It's probably something from outside. So yeah, so all these lifestyle factors are often linked to globalization, right? So even at that level, what we eat, our lifestyle, and so forth, and which is an important part of community and community development, right? Communities, they cannot really develop well if the population is not healthy. Okay, so that's a big factor in community development. All right, so globalization does play a big role in our everyday lives. Okay, so what is globalization? Well, globalization is um, not just products. It's not just about products and importing, exporting products. It is a process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments of different nations, a process driven by international trade and investment and aided by technology, okay? So really it comes down to just heightened interaction and integration between people from different places, from different countries, mostly from different countries. But globalization can even affect what happens within countries. So for example, globalization has been arguably the cause of many young people living in, say, kampong areas, moving to the cities, moving to Kuala Lumpur. Why? Because a lot of the jobs provided by international companies, multinational companies, who provide a lot of the jobs and the higher wages, they are settled or they are based in the cities. So by them being based in the cities, it attracts workers from the other parts of the country, right? So even within the country, globalization can have an impact on communities very directly, community development. So now we have this, really it's a sort of silent crisis, I think, in Malaysia, where a lot of the kampong areas, there's just the people are leaving, there's just no one there anymore. There's no more balik kampong because there's no kampong anymore. The kampong is KL, right? Because all the people, either the Machin Pachi have died off, the Ato and Nene, they're no longer there. And the young people have left, right? So globalization has an impact even within countries, all right? It's not just about integration and interaction across countries, but also even within countries. So any process that involves this heightened interaction and integration, okay? And there's many causes, sources of globalization. Okay, so let's look at the shrinking globe, all right? The shrinking globe. So, sorry, I'm trying to get my chat here. So the world has been shrinking. Of course, not literally, but it has been seemingly getting smaller because of one thing: transportation. Okay, before we talk about technology, ICT and all that, let's first talk about transportation. Okay, from the 1500s to the 1840s, people were traveling by horse and buggy. Okay, horses and horse-drawn coaches and ships, right? Transportation was slow, right? Obviously, if transportation is slow, that means there's going to be less long distance interaction. And if it is, it's going to take a much longer time, which means that life itself is slower, right? Life itself is slower. For example, if you want to send a communication to somebody, right? Now we do it in nanoseconds, not even seconds. We send messages back and forth across the globe within, half a second. We can communicate. In the 1500s, how long do you think it would take to send a communication across the globe, right? So, for example, like in America in the 1500s, which at that time was just some British colonies, wasn't even a country yet, and some natives. Of course, there were Native Americans there, or on Asli there. But say somebody in Europe, in England, wanted to send a letter to somebody in the US at the time, in America. It would have taken weeks just to send one message, right? So now, literally within seconds. Okay, so that definitely affects how the sense of integration and the ability of people to interact is much less. And then after that, from around 1850, 1930, we have the steam locomotive, so trains. Okay, so they started building trains. So trains came on the scene, and trains as well as steamships dramatically enhanced the speed of communication. As you can see there, from 10 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour. So suddenly, people could travel across even continents, right? Like Europe to Asia, and different parts of Asia, and the Americas, and so forth. They could travel long distances at a much faster rate. Then the 1950s, we start to have airplanes, okay, propeller airplanes, which are not that fast, but airplanes came on the scene. And then by the 1960s, you already had jet aircraft. Okay, so within this period of just 400 years, we had this tremendous increase in the speed of transportation, which obviously is going to have dramatic effects on the level of integration and interaction between people. Okay, so this sort of set the stage for globalization. It's important to realize, though, that this is not, globalization is actually not a new thing. If you go back to like the study of the early empires in history, like the Roman Empire, and then of course the Muslims, when the Muslims were the world leaders in terms of civilization. The major Islamic empires like the Abbasid Empire, the Umayyads, and the Ottomans, they were very multinational and multicultural, right? There was actually a lot of globalization at that time as well. Of course, it wasn't called globalization. It didn't have, of course, because it was of a different nature. It's a different time. But you did have a lot of multinational interaction and people from different cultures interacting in those periods. And it has to do with the fact, like for the like the Ottoman Empire, for example, there was very free. It was very free to, you were free to move in that kind of a nation, and of course it spanned such a huge area. So people from different parts of the Ottoman Empire could travel and integrate and so forth. So of course it didn't have the same speed, and it wasn't as easy to get around in those days. But they did have a lot of interaction from between people from different backgrounds. Okay, so it's not the first time it's happened in history, but of course it's of a different nature nowadays. Okay, so for example, okay, I left you with that last slide looking at jet airplane travel. Now, the latest technology coming from Elon Musk at SpaceX. Okay, what would it be like flying from New York to Shanghai in 39 minutes? Okay. Apparently, SpaceX, the company SpaceX, is working on a rocket that would be used to transport people, like airplanes transport people, so that people could travel from one side of the Earth to the other side of the Earth in under an hour. So it'd be like a rocket ship that doesn't actually go into space. It goes into near orbit, like low-level space, but then it just comes back to Earth. And so this is the technology that they're looking at, and they're trying to develop it now. So imagine what the world is going to be like when you can travel literally halfway around the world in less than an hour. Okay. I mean, people can commute. Like in Malaysia, you can work in New York City. Literally, you can just commute there every day. Can you imagine? Amazing. Right? Now, amazing good, amazing bad, we don't know, but it's just amazing to think about, right? And so that will definitely add to this idea and this reality of globalization, where you have people interacting at a different level. Okay, so this is something that could be coming in the future. All right, so let's look at the types of globalization. So globalization is not only about economics, actually. It's not only about, there's of course, it's driven by economics, without a doubt. It's driven by countries trading with others, okay? So, and having few trade barriers, all right? So it's the bringing down, it's the elimination of tariffs and trade barriers that makes free trade possible between countries. So I'm a Malaysian, I want to sell my products in the US, and then the Americans want to sell their products in Malaysia. So we sign an agreement, a free trade agreement, and we say, okay, free flow, you sell yours, we'll sell ours. And then you have this increase in economic activity, okay? That's ideally how it's supposed to work, okay? But there's, of course, inherent inequalities with that, obviously. And this is what our former Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, is always talking about in terms of trade, because of the inherent inequalities that come with free trade, right? So for example, a small company in Malaysia trying to compete with a major corporation from the US, it's not even, right, in terms of their abilities to do business. So it's not really even or equal. right? So free trade does not always mean equal trade. It does not always mean equality, right? It often means inequality, and this is one of the controversies and one of the criticisms of globalization. Okay, so there's a lot of economics in related to globalization because of this idea of free trade, right? Reducing the number of barriers, reducing the tariffs, the taxes that go on with trade to facilitate this increase in trade between countries. Okay, that's one of the major economic aspects of globalization. That's what really drives it. But it's also social. Okay, so the passing and spreading of information and ideas between people and their countries, both within their country and between different countries. Okay, so of course, obviously, internet and social media facilitates that. Okay, so we know that globalization is enhanced. It's furthered along, so to speak, because of the information that gets passed between people from different places. Okay, so that's the social element of globalization, and that also includes the social is also includes the knowledge that gets passed through things like students attending online classes in other countries or from other countries and so forth. So it's the passing of information, ideas, and then the political element or aspect of globalization. All right, so globalization means it facilitates more political cooperation, ideally. Okay, and can anybody tell me, just to make sure you guys are awake, can anybody tell me what are some of the political bodies, political institutions, or organizations that are involved in sort of global politics, right? The globalization of politics. What kind of organizations are involved in that kind of thing? Can someone give me an example? Who can give me an example of, yeah, that's right, Jonathan, WHO. So WHO, of course, is PBB. What's PBB, Normal? Huda, what's PBB? Yeah. Oh, okay. Is that in Malay? PBB, United Nations. Yeah, of course. The first one that comes to mind is United Nations. Okay, United Nations. So attempting the UN is ASEAN is another one. Yep, Zuleika. It's more of a regional cooperative body, ASEAN, but definitely involved in the political cooperation between countries, and it's an aspect of globalization that you have this regional governing structure, or you have a global governing structure like the UN, right? And they're not really govern. They don't really govern. I mean, you can't say the UN governs the world per se. They don't really have any authority other than the authority that the nations involved give them. All right. So, Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu. So it's UN. Thank you, Nadia. Okay. So yeah. So these are examples, good examples. WHO is a health organization, but it is a global health organization. I don't think WHO is supposed to be involved in politics per se. They're more on global health issues. So I don't know if they would count as a political body, but they are definitely international, and they are definitely right in there with the whole another aspect or another dimension of globalization for sure. Yeah, especially now with COVID-19, we can see the role that the WHO plays. But I think in terms of their specific role, they just make recommendations to political bodies and to governments. All right, so let's look at the causes of globalization. So one is improved communications, okay, and you can see there all these international media bodies, right, involved in the spread of information, the global dissemination of information. So you have development of communication technologies. You have the internet, obviously, email, mobile phones. So that has been a huge engine of globalization. And of course, development of satellite TV channels. So you have BBC, CNN, we can all watch those if we have satellite TV, right? If we have Astro or whatever, we can watch these international TV channels. Although they're not really international, they're Western based, but they have international versions of their networks. And these, as it says, provide worldwide marketing avenues. So again, there's goods and services actually being marketed through these communication companies as well, right? They're not solely providing information; they're also involved in marketing products. All right, so definitely one of the causes of globalization is improved communications. One of the major causes. Okay, now this is a diagram. It's quite interesting, actually. As you can see here, it's this is like a network diagram. What it is it's showing us. This is an example of the U.S. in the U.S. And the point here is that in the U.S., globalization has created an industry in communications where the whole industry of communications in the US is basically owned by about 7 companies. Let's see, look at the blue circles here. Comcast is one, AT&T is the biggest, Disney, 21st Century Fox, CBS, Viacom. So there's 6 actually. And then it's showing you all the subsidiary companies underneath these major conglomerates. Okay, so for example, under AT&T, you have things like Turner Sports, Mad Magazine, DC Comics, Bleacher Report, CNN. Okay, see now CNN is not actually its own company. It actually has a parent company. It's actually owned by AT&T, right? So you see all these other ones. I mean, some of these you guys are not familiar with probably, but I'm sure you've heard of things like HBO, Cinemax, Fox News, maybe you've heard of. And then of course Disney is a major one. So Disney owns Fox. No, sorry, 21st Century Fox owns Fox. Anyway, you can see the Marvel Entertainment. So Marvel, all the Avengers, everything is actually part of Disney. Lucasfilm, which makes the Star Wars movies, Pixar, which makes all those cartoon movies. All right, so you can see that a lot of these companies are actually owned by bigger companies. Okay, here you have Nickelodeon and all these cartoon companies, Cartoon Network, all these things. So what it's showing is that actually there's a huge concentration of power in the communications industry, especially in the US. And it's not only in the US, right? It's not only in the US, because some of these stations we get through Astro, we get through HIP TV in Malaysia, right? So let's find CNN. Where is CNN? CNN is under AT&T. It's owned by AT&T. So the parent company, AT&T, is the one that actually drives the policy of the subsidiary companies, right? So these are not all independent companies. They're actually owned by these massive conglomerates, huge mega companies, right? And it shows that there is an incredible concentration of wealth in the industry, and that there's only really 6 major players that are essentially sending out the messages. They're basically communicating with everybody through all these subsidiary companies. All right. So it's really interesting. It's very important that we understand this, because this is how globalization takes place. So the reach, these companies have a tremendous reach. So for example, AT&T, maybe based in the US, but through its subsidiaries like CNN, DirecTV, DC Comics, they're sending out their products to all over the world. Okay, very powerful. These corporate communication companies are very powerful, right? And so what does it mean? What does it mean when we have such a concentration of power in an industry? Who can share? Who can tell me? What do you think it means? My question is, what does it mean when you have such a concentration of power? For example, like all these companies you see here are actually owned only by six conglomerates, six major corporations own all these different companies. So what does it mean when you have such a concentration of wealth and power? What are some of the implications of that? Can anyone tell me? No, no one. Well, it means that there's not a lot of independent kind of the messages that are being sent, the media, the information that's being sent is really being driven by only six main players, right? So there isn't really a lot of diversity out there. There isn't really a lot of room for independent material and so forth. Influence, absolutely, Zuleika. Thank you. Tremendous influence. Imagine how much power they have. AT&T, 190 billion US dollars in revenue in a year. Can you imagine? That's tremendous power in terms of economics. And so they can penetrate media markets all over the world with their power. And they can dictate what you watch. They can dictate what you think. They can dictate the things you like. Okay, that's the kind of power they have. So it's important to know that things are not just because you see all these different channels on there's Astro, you think that they're all independent individual companies and they all have their own message and their own maybe philosophy, what they want to produce. In actuality, many of them are owned by the same company. Okay, and they're really sending out the same messages through their networks. Okay, so that's communication, and that's how globalization really takes off, because of the power of these massive companies that are able to penetrate markets all over the world, right? So how is like Media Prime in Malaysia, who owns like TV3 and TV3 and maybe TV8 or something, how are they supposed to compete with a company like AT&T, right? If you talk about free trade and globalization, how are they supposed to compete with a company that's that big and that powerful? It's very, very difficult. They can't, right? Which is why globalization gets criticized so much, right? It rewards these really, really big, very powerful companies. Okay, the second one is improved transportation. So in addition to communication, transfer of information, which we can see is very much concentrated among major companies, we have the same thing in terms of transportation. Okay, so with the development of refrigerated and container transport, bulk shipping and improved air transport has allowed the easy mass movement of goods throughout the world, right? So now we can ship goods and throughout the world quite easily, and of course of different types. So even if they're refrigerated goods, they can be shipped throughout the world because of technology related to refrigeration and so forth. Okay, you have your FedEx airplanes that travel all over the world sending packages and all that. Okay, so transport has definitely increased globalization, obviously, right? A third cause is free trade agreements, right? So multinational corporations and rich capitalist countries have always promoted global free trade as a way of increasing their own wealth and influence. Okay, international organizations such as the World Trade Organization, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund also promote free trade, right? Now, why might that be? Well, those organizations are led by mostly the wealthy countries. And so, maybe not directly, but indirectly at least, they are really providing support for the wealthier wealthier countries and a lot of these global corporations, like I showed you before, right? So free trade is always good for the big boys, so to speak, the big boys, you know, the big companies, right? Because they have massive influence. They have tons of products, okay? Let me give you one example. In Malaysia, one of the most popular drink companies is what? Producer of drinks. There's two very big ones. What's one of the most popular ones? I mean, literally, this company is like, yes, thank you, Huda. It didn't take you long. Nestle. Malaysians love Nestle. You got your Nescafe, you got your Milo, you got your Horlicks, you got your what else? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's part of your culture, you know. Nescafe, Milo, Farm Fresh is part of Nestle. Is owned by Nestle. Tell me. Yeah, Cocoa Crunch, all the cereals, all the ice cream, right? What else? I mean, they do so much business in Malaysia. It's unbelievable. Actually, Farm Fresh, they have an agreement with UPM. We produce a lot of their, we produce some, I don't know how much, but we produce some of their milk from our dairy farm here in UPM. So I think it's local. I always buy Farm Fresh milk because I think it's local and it's UPM produced milk. So you should always buy Farm Fresh milk. Okay, support your university. Yes, F&N, Jonathan, thank you. Coca-Cola, Sprite, you know, all the drinks, all the F&N drinks. Okay, that's another big one. Maggie's local, I think. I think Maggie's local. All right. But the one I love is Nestle, because Nestle just is everywhere in Malaysia. Everything is Nestle. So Nestle does so much business here. Nestle is a multinational, a huge multinational corporation, right? And so their agreement with the Malaysian government is because they have so many products to sell, and they can sell them at such a cheap price because they're so big. It's called economies of scale. The bigger you are, the more resources you have to produce those products cheaper, right? So that's why smaller companies really struggle to compete, because they don't have the economies of scale. So they have to produce things at a more expensive price. And of course, if their prices are more expensive than the big companies, big corporations, they can't compete with them. Okay, so it's really hard for small local companies to compete with big multinational corporations, which is why a lot of countries they don't want to let the multinational companies have too much free access to their markets, because they will run the little guys, run the local companies out of the markets, right? So for example, we see KFC, right? Everyone loves KFC. It's a multinational company based in the US. What happens when you have Kelantan Fried Chicken? Another KFC, Kelantan Fried Chicken. How can they compete with KFC? Gimana? There's a few other FCs I've seen, local FCs. So they have Kelantan Fried Chicken, and there's another one in Bangi recently. It also closed down, right? So nobody wants to buy the local one. Why? Kenapa? Tak sedap, eh? Local fried chicken, I think is sedap. Malaysian fried chicken, right? But Malaysians love KFC. Not much marketing. True. That's also true, Huda. They don't have the resources to be able to market their products like the big multinational companies. Okay. So, so free trade agreements are great for big multinational corporations, right? And they're not so good for local companies. They're not so good because, the reasons I just mentioned, also local companies, they don't have the resources to be able to go and sell their products to so many other countries. They just don't have those kind of resources to do it, right? Whereas the multinational companies do, right? So it's very easy for them to do it. So, of course, free trade agreements almost always benefit the big multinational companies, which the vast majority are, you know, Western companies. Of course, now we're seeing more Chinese companies and maybe Japanese companies that are competing as well. Samsung, you know, Samsung's a huge multinational company from Korea. Okay, so they can also compete with a lot of the Western companies as well. All right. So, but this is a major cause of globalization. Open up the markets, make the markets free so that the goods can flow, right? That's the idea. The goods can flow back and forth. And then global banking is another cause, right? So modern communication technologies allow for vast amounts of capital, of money to flow freely and instantly throughout the world, right? So the equivalent of up to $1.3 trillion US dollars. $1 trillion. That's 4 sets of zeros. That's 12 zeros. That's a 1 with, yeah, a 1 with 12 zeros after it. Is traded every day through international stock exchanges in cities such as New York, London, and Tokyo. That is a massive amount of wealth, a massive amount of wealth, okay? So global banking, because of communication technology, right? Money just flows because it's just numbers on a screen, right? Imagine all this money that's supposedly being transferred back and forth through trading and through buying and selling is nothing more than digits on a computer screen. That's all it is. It's amazing if you think about it. It's really interesting. So that is another cause of course, it makes doing business fast and easy. You're just transferring money through computers and so forth, right? So global banking, another cause of globalization. And here we go, the growth of multinational companies in particular, all right? So all these companies you see on the right are a massive cause of globalization. The rapid growth of big MNCs is a cause as well as consequence of globalization. The investment of MNCs in farm, mines, and factories across the world is a major part of globalization. Globalization also allows multinational corporations to produce goods and services and to sell products on a massive scale throughout the world. Okay, so all the reasons we just talked about, but also I didn't mention the investment of these companies in local farm, mines, and factories. So they come into Malaysia because, okay, they've reduced the trade barriers, so there's no more trade barriers, right? So they come into Malaysia and they start buying stuff, right? Because they have a lot of resources. So we're gonna buy this local, tin mine or something, for example. So they buy the mine, they own the mine. So they may hire local workers, or at least somewhat local workers. They may also bring in some foreign workers, right? But they're gonna try and keep their costs down, pay the workers less because they want to keep their costs down, right? Otherwise, it's not really worth it. It's not really worth it for them to do business here because they won't be making enough profit. And so they do business and they do very well, and they use local resources. All right, so multinational companies. Now let's look at this chart. Okay, this is another chart of the food industry, the global food industry. Now look at this here. You see how many companies? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. About 9 or 10. Yeah, about 10. These 10 companies here. All right. So one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay, these guys basically own all the major food companies in the world. 10 companies only. It's pretty scary to think about. Basically, these guys are making all of our food, with the exception, of course, of all of our local food, locally produced food. But like, you guys love Wall's ice cream. Wall's is here under Unilever. Unilever is a major company based in Europe, I think. I'm not sure where it's based. So you have your Magnum ice cream, your Wall's ice cream. All your candy from Mars. Mars is a big candy producer. They make a lot of candies. Right. What are some other brands here? Look at all the Kellogg's cereal. I think, Hazi, if you mentioned cereals before. General Mills. This is General Mills. They also make a lot of cereals. Right. All the junk food. This is all junk food. Pepsi. Oh God, Pepsi. They just produce a lot of crap. Look at all this junk food they produce. All this one. Chips, candy bars, soda, all the stuff that's not good for us. All the stuff that causes things like diabetes is produced by these big conglomerate companies. And many of them are from the US, which is why the US is so unhealthy. One of the reasons why it's such an unhealthy country. The US, I think, has worse diabetes than Malaysia, right? Because they're consuming all this processed junk food. produced by all these companies. Now, where's Nestle? All right, Nestle. Yay, we love Nestle. Milo. Okay, is Milo on here? I don't see Milo. Nescafe. Here's Nescafe. Nescafe. God, Nestle. Look at all the products they own. Look at all these products. All the ice cream. Oh, see, this one doesn't even include Milo. I think this is the US version. So these are all the US brands and stuff. But if we add the international brands that they make, you'd see Milo and probably a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't see Milo here. Strange. Yeah, this must not be. Because in the US, we don't drink Milo. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's not big in the US, Milo. Kit Kat. Kit Kat is here. So, okay, so the point here is that these, again, these multinational companies own, and they own most of the brands that we eat every day, with the exception, of course, of our local foods, which is really why we should eat more local foods, buy local foods, local products. It's not so much, it's not so much trying to be anti-Western or anything. That's these multinational companies are really not. They're beyond. That's why they're called multinational, because they have headquarters all over the world. I mean, yes, they're mostly Western companies, but they're not. It's the power that they yield, right? It's too much concentrated power, because when they have that much concentrated power, they can make a lot of decisions for us, right, on our behalf, right? And it's usually just for their own economic benefit, often, to sell their products. And put simply, a lot of their products are just not good for us. Look at the products on this map. I mean, most of these products are just not good for us. So let's go and, I like going to my local store and buying all the, the local vegetables and the meats and all the, good stuff. That's what we should be doing more of that, if possible. It's good for our health, and it's also good for the economy as well, the local economy. Okay, but I'm not trying to preach to you guys. I'm just trying to make you aware that this is real. This is real. All right. So it's globalization, all right? And so the effects of globalization are, you have a change in food supply. Oh, look at my little annotations. I have to get rid of these guys. Whoops. I have to erase. Sorry. Bye. No marks. Okay. You have effects on the food supply, okay? So food supply is no longer tied to seasons. You can buy food anywhere in the world at any time of the year. So when I was growing up, fruits were seasonal in the U.S. So like in the summer, we would buy our peaches and nectarines and plums, which you guys don't get a lot of those here. And in the winter, in the fall, like in between summer, musim panas, musim sejuk is something called autumn or fall, but sort of in between. Yeah, that's when apple season. So we'd go and get the apples, we eat the apples. Right, so fruit used to be seasonal. Vegetables also, like tomatoes was summer. It was summer. It was musim panas because it was tomatoes. It was a lot of the yummy fruits. Nowadays you can get any fruit any time of the year because of globalization, right? So we can get our apples from China or our apples from Australia when the season is not right in the U.S. or wherever South. I've seen. It's amazing. Even the grocery store here in the Kedai Besar in like Tesco and Giant, you look at where they get their fruits from, Chile, South Africa, Egypt, I mean, all over the world. And to me, the funniest thing is when they import bananas. They import bananas in Malaysia. Malaysia has over 30 jenis of bananas, according to my ayam mertua, who's an expert in pisang. Okay, he says Malaysia grows 37 types of bananas. Anybody can confirm that? Malaysia grows 37 different types of bananas. But they still import them from like the Caribbean, on the other side of the world. You see bananas from like Nicaragua or Guatemala or something. It's the funniest thing. And that's globalization, right? Why would they do that? Why would they? Who can tell me why? Can anybody tell me why? Why would they import bananas from the other side of the world to Malaysia when Malaysia grows 37 different types of bananas? Banyak pisang sini. Why do they import them? Who can tell me? Who can tell me why? Different quality? Well, yeah, they may be different quality, but I think Malaysian bananas are better. I don't think it's about quality though, Hazif. Honestly, I don't think they're slightly different. They're bigger and the taste is a bit different. But I don't think it's about quality. Branding. I don't think I don't think, and I could be wrong. I mean, I could be wrong, but branding, I don't think people associate brands with bananas, with pisang. Business purpose, mass production, overproduced crop, maybe low prices. Family Mart, yeah, Family Mart sells bananas. Yeah, business. So yeah, the other side of globe, not in the Katulistiwa. What does that mean, Nizam? So people, okay, so Leica, you're saying that, oh, branding, people actually buy that because the brand. Well, one of the big brands of banana globally is Dole. I don't know if you heard of Dole, D-O-L-E. So this is a big international food company. They're probably one of those smaller companies under those big ones we just showed. They sell bananas all over the world. So brand, it could be, you know, oh, I'm gonna go buy Dole bananas. I don't know. But yeah, no, it's definitely has to do with trade, international trade. Again, when you have companies that have access to Malaysian markets, so for example, like maybe Dole is a subsidiary of Nestle, just for example, okay? Nestle has open access to Malaysian markets. So Nestle is going to sell their bananas here in Malaysia because they can. They have this free trade agreement, right? So yeah, it's about, again, it's about the trade barriers, it's about the influence of the multinationals, right? Obviously, Malaysians don't need any more bananas coming from the other side of the world. It has nothing to do with demand. It has to do with the behavior of these companies and their access to Malaysian markets. Okay, that's the only reason why they would sell bananas from, you know, Costa Rica or something in Malaysia. Doesn't make any sense. So, and they're expensive. Mahal gila. Malaysian bananas here are so cheap. You can go outside and pick them off your tree in front of your house. Very cheap. But those bananas in the store you buy are very expensive. You know, so again, it's that idea of, like Zuleika mentioned, branding. In that sense, it could be branding. Okay, division of labor. Okay, so globalization affects the division of labor. Because MNCs, they will always search for the cheapest locations to manufacture and assemble their components, production processes, may be moved from developed to developing countries where costs are lower. So this is a very big issue all over the world. In the US and in the wealthier developed countries, they always talk about jobs being sent overseas, right? Companies are sending their factories to developing countries like Malaysia and Vietnam and China, right? And so they're complaining that they're losing jobs and they're being sent here, right? And so, of course, and Malaysia is always welcoming foreign direct investment, right? Companies to come and set up their businesses here. So division of labor becomes very different. And this is why we have so many foreign workers in the country, right? Because they're importing workers to work in factories mostly, or on construction companies and so forth. So globalization has a profound effect on the division of labor based on the practices of these multinational companies. Okay, less job security, right? In the global economy, jobs now are becoming more temporary and insecure, right? That's definitely true. At least compared to when I was a young worker, like just out of like your guys' age, 20 years ago or so. It's very different now. Job security, we don't have job security like we used to. And during my father's time, and maybe your parents' time, even regardless whether US, Malaysia, it was very common for someone to work their whole lives in one company or in one government agency or whatever, people, once you started a job at a place, you stayed there your whole life until you retired. Sampai pension, you were in the same company, right? That was the norm back then. Now it's very different, right? People change their jobs all the time. Companies hire and fire all the time. You can see that a survey of American workers showed that people now hold 7 to 10 jobs over their working life. Okay, 7 to 10 jobs. That's a lot. You know, that's a lot of change. That's a lot of change, and that is constantly increasing as well. And even in Malaysia, a lot of young people do this sort of job hopping thing. You know, they work 2 or 3 years at a place, they get a better offer, they leave, go to another company, work there 2 or 3 years, get a better offer, they leave. So they're constantly trying to improve their, you know, usually it's improve the gaji and so forth, right? By going to new jobs. Right? So there's less job security, and this is one of the effects of globalization because of the role of all this direct foreign investment and companies coming in and out and setting up new factories and then leaving, and then, you know, you have all this economic activity and it creates this kind of work environment. Another effect of globalization is definitely definitely damage to the environment. More trade means more transportation, which uses more fossil fuels and causes pollution. That's true. However, the effects on climate change, even though it's the media tends to present this as a sort of case closed kind of thing. The effect of these kind of things on climate change is still debated among scientists. Definitely, it's had a negative effect on pollution. There's definitely more pollution, both in terms of the pollution in the air pollution, water pollution. You know, effects on climate change. There's still some debate about that. To what extent that's occurring? Climate change is definitely occurring, but whether pollution is a direct cause of it is still debated to some degree. But nevertheless, definitely there's been damage to the environment as a result of course, all this heightened economic activity. Cultural impact. Now we get into something that I think that's a bit more close to a lot of people's hearts in countries like Malaysia, who are the recipients of so much direct foreign investment and so much Western sort of economic activity. Okay, so you can see on the bottom there, Starbucks Malaysia, McDonald's Malaysia, you know, your Avengers, Marvel's movies, everything. So this idea of cultural imperialism is very real, the dominance of one culture over all others. So Hollywood movies, McDonald's, Disneyland, Starbucks, these are all definitely sort of Western cultural, yeah, I mean, they're companies that are importing a culture, right? They're importing a culture. Just the idea of fast food, right? I mean, compare fast food, right? Food that you can get in literally in minutes, and it comes in like a box, right? I mean, if you told 100 years ago, if you went to the kampong somewhere and told people that, you know, in 100 years, people will be ordering food that they can get in less than 2 minutes, and it comes in a box, and you can sit it and eat. You can eat in your car, stuff like that. People would be, it's insane. That's crazy, right? Culturally, it's just different. It's just so different. So this idea that there's a monoculture being created, right? So it removes local competition and thereby forces local firms to close. That's true, but that's an economic effect. The monoculture comes from anywhere you go in the world now, at least major centers of commerce and centers of culture, like big cities, for example. You know, you go to Sydney, Australia, you go to Makkah, you go to Kuala Lumpur, you go to Bangkok, you go to wherever, there's this certain monoculture, right? There's a McDonald's and there's a McDonald's there, and all of them, they all work the same way. There's a Starbucks there with all the same, you know, same products, basically, same way of doing things. Okay, so it's creating this sort of monoculture where everything is sort of done the same way, and it's done according to that sort of Western cultural way, right? So it's this idea that there's a cultural imperialism going on, that this Western culture is dominating all these local cultures, right? And of course, there's truth in that. When my mother came to visit in 2007, she came with a friend of hers. At that time, she was in her 70s, but when they were completely blown away by the amount of American products and American businesses they saw in Malaysia. They were just floored. They couldn't believe it. They just couldn't believe it, right? So I don't even think a lot of Western people realize the extent of their own cultural imperialistic kind of, driven by these multinational companies, not by the people in those countries, but by the multinational companies that are driving this kind of thing, right? And then the dominance of English language, because of course these are all companies that are English speaking mainly, but of course they do adapt to the local culture. You know, we see McDonald's with its nasi lemak and its bubur ayam. Okay, it's trying to adapt to the local culture. Right, so they do have, there is that element. They do try to adapt to local culture. And then you have increase in anti-globalization protests, all right? So because of the growing awareness of the negative impacts of globalization, there's a lot more protest against a lot of the practices of globalization. So people have begun to realize that globalization can be challenged by communities, supporting each other in business and society, and through public protest and political lobbying. So I think there's a lot more awareness nowadays of how all this globalization is actually impacting communities. You know, people losing their jobs, people losing their culture, people losing their foods, their local foods, you know, their local businesses are shutting down. So people are starting to become aware that, you know, maybe this is not all good, right? Maybe there's some serious negative consequences of all this globalization, you know? And then the argument that it makes people wealthier, it makes countries wealthier, well, you know, that's also debatable. And the paper you're going to read for next week does go into some of that. And it's going to show you, I think, both pros and cons. There's positives and negatives. You know, so definitely there's been more wealth as a result of globalization. But the question of who has that wealth, right? Is that wealth equally distributed, or is that wealth mostly concentrated among a group of elites in each country? You know, to what extent is that wealth getting down to the people? That's another question that's been debated, and there's a lot of evidence showing that it has not been equally distributed. So globalization, does it hurt the poor or help the poor? And there's really no single answer, in all honesty. And again, we have to look at this as academics. We have to look at this from a perspective of, you know, science and scientific evidence. You know, whether there's any, you know, we don't want to be biased. We want to look at the issue objectively. We want to look at it objectively. And so there's pros and cons. So the poor may benefit. There may be an increase in jobs, you know. Where's that factory, that Nestle factory again in Negris Milan? Last week, somebody mentioned to me. There's a big Nestle factory in Negris Milan, and I had a friend that used to work there. And it's like in this little small village area in Negris Milan. Oh yeah, that's it, Sendayan. So in Sendayan, the Nestle factory has provided a lot of jobs. And they're good jobs, they're decent jobs, you know, they're fairly well-paying jobs. That's a good thing, of course, right? So we can't argue with that. It definitely does bring in jobs. And that's why politicians are always talking about direct foreign investment. You know, that's why they want multinational companies to come to Malaysia and set up their businesses, because it means more jobs for the local Malaysians, right? And that's true. There is truth in that. Cheaper consumption. So of course, it makes, you know, brings down prices. Yeah, it brings down prices because their products are cheaper, bottom line. Opportunity for education, savings, and entrepreneurship. Well, there's some opportunities, yeah, that's true. Okay, there are some opportunities for the poor. Again, the extent to which that's true, as opposed to the negative aspects, is debatable. In other cases, however, workers are displaced by imports and they lose their jobs. So other workers lose their jobs. You know, the local Machi Pachi store at the corner may have to close down because they cannot compete with Tesco. Tesco is just putting them out of business. Everything in Tesco is cheaper, better quality. You know, they get their jam from the UK rather than from, you know, Penang or whatever. So they want the UK stuff. So of course, in some cases, it's going to definitely affect workers negatively. Poor consumers may pay more, not less, for what they need. In some cases, some products may actually become more expensive, right? If those prices are not controlled. Like in Malaysia, you have this good system where the government is very active in setting price controls on certain needed products, necessities, you know, which I think is a great policy. In the US, we certainly don't have that, but it does protect the lower income people to some degree, you know, and the government has to do that. The government has to protect, you know, the poor. On average, countries that have embraced globalization have done better on the whole than those who have not. Okay, so for example, some countries in Asia, again, this is sort of debated, whether that's true or not. Have done better, what does that mean? Does that mean economically only? Does that mean socially? You know, it's really hard to determine these things objectively because there's a lot of pros and cons. A lot of these things are hard to measure. Like socially, how do you know whether globalization has been positive or negative in terms of social, you know, social development? It's really hard to answer that question. It's hard to measure. It's hard to know. So in general, globalization alone is never enough to cure poverty. It cannot be, because it benefits, too often it benefits wealthier people, especially those attached to multinational companies. Other things, other needed things such as education, good governance, and investment in capital and structure, right? So for globalization to really be beneficial, there has to be a lot of governance. You know, the government has to regulate it, right? The government has to help those affected by globalization in a negative way. The government has to provide a safety net for those that, you know, aren't able to survive in a world where you have a lot of competition between companies, global companies. So there has to be a lot of buffering effects by government to really make globalization something positive. It cannot be unfettered globalization without any regulations, because otherwise then the companies will just do what they want and they'll do anything they want to sell their products. Okay. So, you know, a lot of those global companies, they also sell a lot of unhealthy products. For example, some of those big communications companies, you didn't see on that chart just there, they also make a lot of money by selling things like pornography, okay? They make a lot of money selling things like alcoholic products. You know, so there's also those kinds of things which come with globalization, all right? So again, this is, I think it's true, there's no single answer. We really have to look at it objectively. And I think it's also really important to look at it on a case-by-case basis. You know, in Malaysia, it may work in certain ways, it may not work in certain ways. The government may have to regulate it in certain ways, you know, and all those things. So you can't really take it, I don't think you can take it whole and say it's all good or it's all bad. We have to recognize its strengths and its weaknesses. All right, and I think it's the last slide. I didn't want to break because I think we're just going to finish up straight away, okay? Negative and positive effects for globalization for developing countries, okay? So positive effects. Creates opportunities for firms in less industrialized countries like Malaysia, although Malaysia is a middle income country, it's not really it's not developing anymore. Less industrialized countries to tap into more and larger markets, okay? So it gives access to bigger markets for firms to sell their products. That's true. Malaysian companies now can sell their products all over the world, okay? That's true. Leads to more access to capital, you know, to money, to technology, to human capital, cheaper imports, and larger export markets. That's true. It allows businesses in less industrialized countries to become part of international production networks and supply chains that are the main conduits of trade. So local companies can now tap into bigger networks, right, to sell their products, to market their products, etc. Okay, so that's all true. Negative effects, cultural uniqueness is lost in favor of homogenization and a universal culture that draws heavily from American and Anglo culture, right? So this cultural imperialism. Malaysians feel like they're losing their culture because of globalization. That's true. Competition among developing countries to attract foreign investment leads to a race to the bottom in which countries dangerously lower environmental standards. So, you know, for Malaysia to attract the latest Intel factory, they have to compete with Vietnam. And the way they compete is they have to basically make deals with these companies and say, okay, we're not going to tax you for 5 years, and we're going to loosen our environmental regulations, and we're going to make it really easy for you to do business here, right? They have to do that in order to compete with another country like a Vietnam or Indonesia or Philippines, in order to get that company to come to Malaysia, right? So it has this effect where there's this race to the bottom where everybody's trying to outdo one another, and they end up compromising on all their standards, especially environmental standards, and so forth. You know, like a lot of those big international companies, they may get deals from the government, they call sweetheart deals. 5 or 10 years, they don't have to pay any taxes. Imagine, they can make a ton of money, right? And so governments, they use those kind of policies to attract those companies to come and set up their businesses. Global commerce is increasingly dominated by transnational corporations which seek to maximize profits without regard for the developmental needs of individual countries. Okay, so I mean, these multinational companies, they don't really care about the well-being of the average Malaysian citizen. What do they care? They just want to come here and make money, right? So they're not really concerned with the well-being of the country per se. You know, some corporations are better than others. They do take an interest in local issues to some degree. So I don't want to say they're all bad. No, many of them do a lot of good work in countries, but for the most part, they're there to make money. I mean, they're a business. Okay, so that's it. And I went through that. I hope I didn't go too fast. Any questions, comments, anything that's not clear? Did I say anything that was controversial that you disagree with? No? No, everything's clear? It is, yeah, Huda, it's an interesting topic. I mean, it's because it impacts our everyday lives. It really does. Every single day we are influenced and impacted by globalization, right? So, you know, and I think it's very true. Those last few slides, I think it's very true that there are both pros and cons. You know, there are negative and positive things about it. And ideally, you know, countries have to find ways to just minimize the negative aspects of it, right? But it becomes very difficult. Like if Malaysia wants to say, okay, we're gonna put a certain trade tariff, like a tax on certain international companies' activities, right? You know, they'll say, well, we're gonna go and do our business in the Philippines because they're not charging us any particular kind of tax, and it's going to be cheaper for us to do it there, right? So Malaysia might lose a company that's going to come in and provide 500 jobs for Malaysians, right? Because of that, right? Because they're trying to actually protect the country. They're trying to protect their economy and their workers and so forth. And by doing that, they actually will end up losing all those jobs. So it's difficult for governments and for leaders, I think, to make these decisions. They're very difficult decisions. You know, and I think the population needs to be more educated and more aware of all these issues related to globalization, so that when we see our government leaders do things, we're not necessarily, you know, we don't strictly criticize. You know, we have to understand that these are very difficult situations, and there's a lot of layers to them, right? So there's a lot of different implications in making these kind of decisions in relation to economics. They're not easy decisions. It's very complicated. It's very difficult, you know. And to do what's best for the country, you know, some people will be better off than others as a result of those decisions. So it's hard to make those decisions. Yeah, so Nizal, you say we need globalization to help us grow. Yeah, we probably do. I mean, you cannot, I mean, look, you cannot completely shut your borders. You just can't do it nowadays. It's impossible to really to do that completely. But I think, so I would agree with you. Just I would agree with you. But at the same time, I need to consider that it has to be done carefully, and government definitely has to play a role in regulating it. To make sure that it really benefits the country as opposed to harming the country. But thank you for your opinion on that. Does anybody have a different view of it now that we've gone through the lecture than you did before, or is it pretty much the same? You're still pretty much where you were before. No? Okay. So no additional comments. All right. Well, so I've given you that assignment, that exercise to do. So I'm going to let you go and then let you spend the last hour of the class working on that article, and then coming up with those three conclusions, basically the three conclusions that I want you to kind of reach after you read the article. That's interesting about North Korea opening up their heavy industry manufacturing sector for their. Yeah, see, North Korea is it's a very unique example because that's a country that really has tried. I mean, you can say what you want about the leaders and all that, but they've really tried economically to maintain their what do you call it? They've really tried to maintain their people nowadays they're referred to as being a country that's isolated because they've really closed off their borders. They don't want influence from the outside. So they've really tried to reject globalization. I mean, really reject completely globalization, right? But I think even now they're realizing that you cannot. It's really hard to do that. It's hard to completely cut yourself off from the rest of the world. But they've tried. They've really tried. And there's a lot of reports about how poor the people are and how the government spends more on military and people don't even have enough food to eat. Whether that's true or not, well, we don't know. But it definitely, this is interesting that you're sharing this, Nisa, that now they're thinking of, or they're opening up their manufacturing. And again, they're trying to make decisions based on what they think is best for their people. So maybe in this sector only, manufacturer, they're going to embrace globalization to some degree, right? But they're still going to have a lot of regulations on other things like communication and so forth. I mean, my personal view is I honestly wish Malaysia would regulate its communications more than they do, right? Like there's certain types of information that the government that they allow into the country, which I just don't see any benefit in. Like why? But this is just my opinion. I'm not trying to influence you guys in any way. It's just my personal opinion. Like China heavily regulates its communications in terms of even internet, what comes in the country and so forth. Right. And then people accuse, oh, if you do that, you're censoring. Yeah. But I mean, personally, I think something should be censored. I'm not against completely censoring some things. But that's just my personal view. Don't take that as anything related to the class. All right. So that's it for today, guys. So please go ahead and get started on that paper, on that article. You can use the rest of the class time for that. All right. And I'll just let you go and work on that on your own. Okay. Anything else anyone want to share? So the slides are up on Pucha Blast. It's all there on Pucha Blast. You can just go there and refer to everything. I've put the link for the Padlet for the article. Let me share the link here. I'll put it on the WhatsApp group just so you have the link for. One sec. the link for the article, this small assignment. I'm going to put the link for the Padlet on the WhatsApp group. It's also on Puja Blast, so you can get it from Puja Blast as well. Hang on. Okay. Okay, I have to redo this. Hang on one sec. I'm just going to get the link and put it in the WhatsApp group. All right. All right, so here's the link. You can also get it on Puja Blast. All right, so there it is. It's up on the WhatsApp group. Okay, so with that, I will adjourn for the day, inshallah. So we'll see you all next week for our final class. Can't believe it. Finally, this semester is coming to a close. No. Just paste your answer there. That's what I'm doing. I'm using Padlet. You can just paste your answer there on the Padlet. No need to upload anything, okay? Again, it shouldn't be too long, but it's, you know, as I said in the Puja Blast, just try to provide some evidence for your response, you know, to support your conclusions. All right. Okay, thanks everyone. Inshallah, see you next week. Assalamu alaikum. Sama-sama. I'm speaking, you guys are writing.
Thank you.
A voice. Sama.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, see you guys.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay.